John is here to share how Saturday Night Live has used Agile in their 44 years of putting on like this great weekly entertainment show. A lot of times we share bios here, but I'm not going to do that because I'm going to let John share whatever he wants to share about himself. So we have to say live from Agile Denver North. It's Thursday Night Live.
Woo!
Woohoo!
Thank you, Marie.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, before we get into this, I see 41 participants at the bottom of the Zoom, which that's 41 more people than I expected. I thought everybody would be watching the NFL kickoff.
Don't mention that's on tonight. What are you thinking?
Well, there's a chance. Yeah, there's nothing earth-shattering about what we're going to talk about tonight. We're just going to tell some stories and just kind of revel in the agility of one particular show that I happen to be obsessed with. But before we get into it, I have to say hi to Kristen McLemore because we worked together about 5 years ago and maybe corresponded a time or two over LinkedIn, but I haven't seen you since. So hi, I was looking forward to seeing you in person. And then this whole thing happened.
That's cool.
So good to see you. All right. Anyway, this is what we're talking about. If you want to continue this conversation at any point in the future, you can just take a picture of that, or just point your camera at it, and it'll take you right to my LinkedIn profile. I could talk about this for days and weeks on end without even stopping for restroom breaks. So, fair warning. Also, I'll show you that again at the end in case you want to reserve judgment for whether or not this is worth talking about. Okay. In order to understand who's on the call, I just want to go through sort of a whiplash history of the last 45 years of SNL, and then find out what your favorite era was. So I took the liberty of dividing 45 years into certain eras that I've roughly categorized into cast changes. And there we go. And here we go. So era number one, we're going to call the Not Ready for Primetime Players. That was the original name given to the Saturday Night Live cast, which at the time was called Saturday Night because there was another show on CBS called Saturday Night Live. It was hosted by Howard Cosell, and NBC didn't get the rights to call it Saturday Night Live until a couple of years later. But this is your original cast. This is Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, Jane Curtin, Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Garrett Morris, Lorraine Newman. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of people, but that lasted until 1979 with a few changes, actually 1980. And then the producer of the show, Lorne Michaels, we're going to talk a lot about, he left because he was exhausted. So another producer took over. Her name was Jean Dumanian, and she produced what is generally regarded as the worst cast of Saturday Night Live in its 45 years. That cast lasted a year, I believe, but this is Charles Rocket. He died recently, but he was fired from the show for dropping an F-bomb as Ronald Reagan live on the air. There's a highlight. Gilbert Gottfried was actually a member of this cast. And then we move into Dick Ebersole territory. Dick Ebersole took over for Jean Dumanian, who took over for Lorne Michaels as the producer. And Dick Ebersole basically built a show around this guy, Eddie Murphy, who is, I think to this day, the top grossing performer of any ex-Saturday Night Live cast member. This lasted for a few years until about 1985, and then Lorne Michaels, the original producer of Saturday Night Live, who heard that the show was going to go off the air, came back around. Actually, I'm wrong about that. There was one more era. Dick Ebersole decided that they were going to toss in all their chips. They were going to have one more year of Saturday Night Live, and then they were going to cancel the show. This is 1984 and 1985. And we refer to that as the Steinbrenner Cast, because they basically just blew all of their budget on talent, like Martin Short and Harry Shearer and Billy Crystal and Christopher Guest. Pamela Stevenson, they brought over from the UK. And that lasted for 1 year, but it sort of resurrected some interest and some belief in the show. And that's when Lorne Michaels came back around and said, okay, I'll take it from here. And he wanted to try something a little bit different. He wanted to reinvent the show. So he brought along this cast of characters that were already recognized by a certain demographic. So you've got Anthony Michael Hall there in the middle. You've got Robert Downey Jr. as a cast member, 1985, 1986. Randy Quaid, Joan Cusack is a member of the cast at this point. And then you'll see some familiar characters who stick around, like John Lovitz on the left and Nora Dunn on the right. This lasts for a year. It was not successful at all. Turns out just because Tony Stark is good in the movies, he's not really good on live TV. So they fire just about everybody, and they bring in a brand new cast, led by Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Kevin Nealon, Victoria Jackson, Jan Hooks, and the like. And that lasted for quite some time. That era stuck around for about 7 years, and it was the first resurrection of Saturday Night Live, at least in terms of longevity. But what happened is that they started getting lazy, and instead of replacing the cast as they have in the past, they just started adding to the cast. So instead of removing certain cast members and then adding Chris Farley, David Spade, Adam Sandler, they just created this new featured player category of cast member, and they got up to about 17 or 18 people. And then critical reviews and popular reviews of the show started to go downhill, to the point that it was time for another mass exodus and a overhaul, which led to Redemption number 2, which is where you get your Sherry O'Terry, Will Ferrell cast. You get Chris Kattan, Tracy Morgan, and that sort of, that ilk. That lasted another 7 years or so. And it was critically and popularly a very highly regarded cast. Again, we kind of eventually are leading toward this overpopulation era, but not before we start getting into sort of these morphings of casts where it's not this wholesale replacement, but you start to see 1 or 2 people dropping off and 1 or 2 people coming around every season. So that you've got this night shift era characterized by the people that are now hosting late night television shows, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, but it's also your Amy Poehler and Tina Fey years. That sort of evolves into the years with Fred Armisen, Kristen Wiig, and that group. And then this thing starts happening again where people are added to the cast, but they're not really removed from the cast. And that's where we are today. There's 18 people in the cast. That number might actually be higher. And you're starting to see that relationship between the number of people in the cast, the size of the team, and the quality of the outcomes. So that's where we are. Those are the eras. So if you would indulge me, what I'd like to do is run a quick Mentimeter here. I want to find out who you believe was the best SNL era. So you can go to menti.com and just pop in 7661082. You can do that on your phone or you can do it on your computer. And I'll just hang out here for a second to find out what we're dealing with. This is also a bit of an age test, I guess. Typically, people tend to favor the era when they were 13 years old.
Sorry, what was the code again?
It's right there at the top, 7661082.
Oh, if I had my glasses on, I would have seen that. Okay, thanks. I never use this tool. This is kind of cool.
That's a good one. I like Menti.
I know, it's really neat.
Pretty spread out here.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised.
Which was Kevin Nealon and John Lovitz?
That would be, I would call that Redemption Part 1.
Oh, okay. I picked right.
This would be the first time that Eddie Murphy gets 0 votes. I'm going to leave this up. It's 7661082. If you're not there yet and you still want to you want to submit a vote so you can see how this final tally ends up, I'll leave it up for a bit. But I'm going to move on. I'm going to introduce myself here in just a little bit, but I do want to just mention, once again, we're talking about a 45-year history that started in 1975, October 11th of 1975, and continues on to this day. And you can tell just by looking at it, the level of technology that is poured into the show from the 70s through the present day is kind of astounding. So I also want to talk about my minuscule place in this 45-year-old history. That's me in a sketch about St. Patrick's Day. And that's Tracy Morgan in the foreground there. This is a sketch with Tracy Morgan and Colin Quinn and Molly Shannon and Sting. The premise of the sketch was that Sting was a guest on Colin Quinn's talk show for Leprechauns. And Sting's special talent was that he could recite limericks based on any town that you mentioned. And that was pretty much it. It wasn't the funniest sketch on the planet, but
you were in it.
To air. So, so I'm going to take it and run with it. It turns out, though, so when I did that, I was playing the starving artist role in New York City in the 90s. I graduated with a undergrad in theater, and what I learned from that experience of being on Saturday Night Live is that I'm more of a connoisseur and more of an obsessed fan than I am a performer. And this is sort of testament to that. So back in 2015, we were spending some time in New York, and the Saturday Night Live exhibition happened to be running in Madison Square, and I took that's my son. He was, I think, 12 at the time, and did not miss a chance to get a picture of him on the Celebrity Jeopardy set behind Turd Ferguson there. So this is a sketch. I'm so obsessed I named the organization after my obsession. Hopefully you'll see why by the time we're done talking. But in the intervening years between 1997 and today, I decided to switch my hobby and my career. I went into the software development profession, became a software development leader. I got into Agile around 2007, and started coaching. I know that I'm talking to rally territory, but I became a coach for version 1 for a couple of years. Moved on to MasterCard to guide them through one of their 18 Agile transformations. I think they were on transformation 3 at the time. And then left MasterCard to start Sketch. So we're on a mission to elevate the ways people work together. We're all about matching the work practices to the 21st century. We do that through coaching, through training, and through software development. So we deal with a lot of DevOps implementations these days. All right, so for the purposes of this talk, and I know I'm talking to a lot of Agilists, but I'm going to use a very shortened definition of agility. I tried to take 4 values and 12 principles and cobble them together like, a piece of charcoal, squeeze it together and make a diamond. Tried to create one nice little run-on sentence that encapsulates the majority of what we talk about when we talk about agility. So let's just say that agility is about teams of self-organized individuals. It's about recognizing the individual in the organization and the power that comes from the knowledge and the brain of the individual, cobbling them together as teams and allowing them to self-organize, and allowing them to deliver value continuously. So let's focus on the value, and let's focus on the continuous and frequent mode of delivery. Mostly delivering value continuously and frequently and learning from that delivery, and then adjusting accordingly indefinitely. So we could debate the merits of whether the words are put in the proper order, but I think we got the right idea there. We're talking about individuals, we're talking about the interactions between them through self-organization and appropriate team structures, early and continuous delivery of valuable software, delivering and learning, inspecting and adapting, and so on. So that whole idea of doing that indefinitely is sort of a nod to the idea that we're not building projects, we're building products, and products live on with an indefinite end date. Well, Saturday Night Live is that product that has an indefinite end date. It's got features and it's got benefits. Those features are the sketches that we see, the opening monologue that we see, the musical guests, weekend update. And those benefits all elicit either laughter or some sort of emotional response. We've got users and we've got buyers. Users of Saturday Night Live are people like you and me. We're the ones that are watching and laughing. But it also has buyers. There are organizations out there that are purchasing Saturday Night Live, and they purchase it in the form of 30-second chunks between the sketches. So companies like Ford and Apple purchase those 30-second chunks. And they hawk their wares in commercials to you and me so that we can laugh in between them. What I find really interesting is that Saturday Night Live is this independent entity that is owned by a conglomerate. It's owned by NBC Universal and Comcast. And I had the pleasure about 15 years ago of meeting the CIO of NBC Universal. And I was in his office noting that his office basically looks out on Rockefeller Center and you can see St. Patrick's from where he sits. And he was wearing a suit and a tie, and everything was pretty much IT based at the time. And it just seemed to me a strange juxtaposition between the culture that exists within Saturday Night Live and the culture that exists on the floor that I visited and the office that I visited, where the individuals that are making decisions about who to sell Saturday Night Live airtime to, those differences are remarkable. So how does Saturday Night Live survive when they have an independent and unique culture of its own? Well, to understand that, you have to understand who Lorne Michaels is. Lorne Michaels had this idea of Saturday Night Live for years before 1975. He had this notion that he wanted this vision, that he wanted to build this TV product that spoke the language of the youth that was watching TV. At the time, the best that you could get were shows like Hee Haw and Carol Burnett. And he would watch those shows and think, nobody is speaking the language of real life on television. He wanted to sound like a college campus. He wanted to sound like National Lampoon. And there was this great debate, and it was this 45-year experiment. And the hypothesis was that these people would tune in, and he couldn't get the producers to agree that this was a good idea, because most of the producers rejected the idea on the grounds that you would never get that audience to tune in at 11:30 on a Saturday night. And I think the results are in, at least for a time. This is all pre-internet, but this show in the 70s was considered revolutionary. People that were watching it in the 70s really hadn't seen anything like it until it came out. But you can see what those 45 years have done to Lorne Michaels. This is him getting the Presidential Medal of Honor, I believe. You can see Tom Hanks in the background also receiving the award. It's like an arts award that is given out by the federal government every year. I think you can watch it on PBS. I think it's the Mark Twain Awards for comedy. In any case, he's gone from a counterculture rebel to sort of, as we'll see in a bit, the king of late night comedy on television. So great, that's what Saturday Night Live is. Let's talk about something completely different. You should recognize this this graphic. This is a depiction of the Agile team. An Agile team, especially a Scrum team, consists of a development team, that group of self-organized individuals, under the guidance of the vision that is articulated by a product owner and facilitated by the servant leadership of a Scrum Master. We see it in its many forms. The main idea being that we're trying to get that team to have the capability to move from concept to cash without having to rely on people outside the team. And that's sort of what Lorne Michaels has created at Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels is the product owner of Saturday Night Live. He calls the shots to this day, 45 years later. He's making decisions about what goes on the air. and what gets cut. Your development team is your cast. Those are the individuals responsible for implementing the vision. Now, in reality, when we're talking about it at this grand scale, we're talking about a lot more than just the cast. There's as many, if not more, writers behind the scenes creating these sketches. There are technicians involved. There are a lot of individuals involved beyond the cast. And then we have the Scrum Master, and this is Joe Dixo. He passed away not too long ago. He was the original stage manager for Saturday Night Live. He does not have a part in deciding what shots are shot where, what the sets look like. He has no say in what sketch goes first, second, or third. And he's also not responsible for implementing any of Lorne's vision. But what he is responsible for is making sure that the show goes off without a hitch, making sure that the cast has everything they need in order to perform as well as they can. So what's really interesting about this, and when we think about scaling, I'm kind of showing what Saturday Night Live looks like from a team perspective at the grand scale, but they've done a really interesting job, a really good job of encapsulating that model and bringing it down to a lower level. For example, this is Streeter Seidel. He's a writer on Saturday Night Live. He wrote a sketch called The Haunted Hotel. I think that's what it's called. So many of you will probably recognize it because it looks like this. This is the sketch with Tom Hanks where he plays David Pumpkins. It's some sort of bizarre, the idea is that they're going on this elevator ride as a haunted house, and every time they open the elevator, it's the floor is has some sort of different scary thing in it. And then every once in a while you get to David as Pumpkins and he's just doing something weird that's not really even all that scary. Well, Streeter Seidel wrote this, and he presented it to Tom Hanks to perform, and Tom Hanks was saying, hey, that Chris Hemsworth is the host next week. I think he'd be a much better David Pumpkins. Why don't you have him do it? But Streeter had the authority to put the pressure on Tom Hanks such that he was pretty much forced into doing this sketch. The show is now directed by Don Roy King. He took over for Joe Dixo. He just won an Emmy not too long ago, and I thought his acceptance speech when he took that Emmy was remarkable. Remember, he's sort of the Scrum Master of Saturday Night Live, and his acceptance speech went a little something like, I get to surround myself with the funniest comedians on the planet, the most brilliant writers you can find, the most amazing lighting and set technicians anywhere to be found, and I get paid a lot of money to say, ready camera one, go camera one. But if you want to give me this award for that, then awesome. And he walked off the stage. And I thought that was an excellent distillation of what it means to be a servant leader, and especially in this role of Scrum Master or stage manager, as they would refer to it, where he's really just making sure that all the things that need to happen are happening, that all of the communication that needs to be sent is sent, and that everybody's happy. So Streeter Seidel, he wrote the sketch. He convinced Tom Hanks to be in it. His level of authority is kind of surprising. He gets to decide beyond just Tom Hanks. He got to decide that Kate McKinnon and Kent Beck were cast in this show as well. Kenan Thompson, he got to make sure that he was cast in this sketch. He got to decide what the set looked like. He got to decide where the cameras were placed and when they would cut from shot to shot. So he gets to decide everything there is to decide about this particular sketch. That is his sketch, and he has 100% complete ownership of it. The only thing he doesn't get to decide is whether or not it gets selected for the show at 11:30 on Saturday night. Then you're kind of left up to more centralized decision-making models, which we'll get into. So while we're watching, I want to just kind of point out a few things here. So we're going to watch a Saturday Night Live episode unfold in about 2 minutes. But as you're watching this, I want you to think about the concept of VUCA. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And nowhere else are you going to get to see such excellent examples of the ability to operate and execute and succeed in that world. What is more volatile than Chris Farley or John Belushi? You do not know whether or not you're going to get a version of that actor to show up on when they go live and perform. I remember when I was on that show for just one episode, I was hanging around the dressing room, which happened to be the set of the Rosie O'Donnell show. And I was watching a rehearsal on the monitor, and it was Norm Macdonald trying to get through the news. And it's about noon on Saturday at this time. And he looked like he hadn't shaven in weeks, and he couldn't manage to get his shirt tucked in. He was slurring his words. I mean, it was like pulling teeth just to get him through reading the cue cards. I mean, that's volatility. In terms of uncertainty, not only do we not know what the next show is going to look like until Monday, but we don't know what the president is going to tweet on the Friday before the show. So how on earth are we supposed to plan a show when the nation is expecting us to respond to things that happened the day before we go live? Yeah, in terms of complexity, I think you're seeing it. You've got so many people trying to move parts around. You've got human beings with emotions and independent agendas. We've got technology that needs to work and broadcast across the country. In terms of ambiguity, what is more ambiguous than the question, is this funny? How do you deal with that? How do you make that determination about what is the funniest thing that we can do this week? So one of the things that they do is they rely on good old empirical process control. Empirical process control, of course, is founded by 3 pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Transparency is the idea that we keep everything visible all the time. We make as much visible as we possibly can. And we use that transparency, we use that visibility so that we can inspect whether or not we're doing the right thing. And when we make that determination as to whether or not we are doing the right thing, if we make the determination that we're not doing the right thing, we need to adapt and do a different thing that gets us closer to the end goal that we had set for ourselves. In this case, the end goal is a 90-minute variety show that ends at 11:59:57 on a Saturday night. So this idea of transparency, inspection, and adaptation, this is something that, when used effectively, happens hundreds of times a day. These adaptations from macro to micro are constantly occurring in this environment. In terms of transparency, we get to see transparency every time the host introduces the musical act. Because you're looking at the audience. The camera is basically telling the audience, hey, we're putting this together in the moment, so cut us a break here. Every time they cut away to the audience, they don't do this so much anymore, but in the 70s, it was a pretty popular thing to do, to zoom in on an audience member and then make a joke about them as a bumper leading into a commercial and then leading back out. For a time in the 80s and 90s, their bumpers would be a zoom out. So they would end the sketch, and then the actors would break and they would walk off stage, and then the cameras would zoom and you would see, oh, it's just a set. And the wall doesn't really extend much higher than the head of the actor. It's an excellent transparency enabler, and what it does is it puts the audience on their side. It gives the audience that idea that this notion that, oh wow, they really are just putting this thing together in real time. There's another example of transparency, though, that I'd like to demonstrate. This is going to be an experiment, so let me know if we're going to have trouble with this. But and in fact, Marie, if you can give me some indication that that you're seeing what I'm seeing, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Bill Murray. You can call me Billy.
It's all good.
Okay.
Yep, it's good.
Everybody just calls me the new guy. I want to thank the producer, Lauren Michaels, for urging me to speak with you directly. You see, I'm a little bit concerned. I don't think I'm making it on the show.
Whoop, hang on. That was my fault. So I wanted to pause that because when he says, I don't think I'm making it on the show, I just want you to watch this with the understanding that this is all 100% true. He had a conversation with a writer that started with, I don't think I'm making it on this show. And the writer and Lauren and Bill Murray had a conversation, and the result was, you're going to tell America that.
Oh.
Show. I'm a funny guy, but I haven't been so funny on the show. My friends say, how come they're giving you all those parts that aren't funny? Well, it's not the material, it's me. It's not that I'm not funny, it's that I'm not being funny at the right time. Honest. Before, you know, I could be funny whenever I wanted, but now, as a professional, I have to learn to pick my spots, you know? This morning, I picked up my laundry. The guy said to me, Bill, you know, every time you come in here, you say something funny. But I saw you on the show Saturday night, and you stunk. Well, this is the story, you know, and just totally destroyed my confidence. Last Friday, I went to a party with Dawney. There's a pretty girl there I wanted to impress.
And by Danny, he's talking about Dan Aykroyd.
And I'm a party animal. I was very funny. Dawney said nothing. He was saving it. She said to me, you're so funny, I wish I had a tape recorder. Well, I wish she had too, you know. Saturday night after the show, when she went home with Dan, I could have played the tape back for her. Now, what I'm asking for is your support. I've gotten some nice letters from old friends and people I owe money to. But from you people, I hear nothing. I'm not asking for letters, but I know this sounds corny. Support. I'm a Catholic. I'm one of 9 children. Ed, Brian, Nancy, Peggy, Bill, Lorraine, John, and Joel. I can say that faster, but I wanted them all to hear their names. I was raised in Wilmette, Illinois, a small mining town north of Chicago. That reminds me of something funny. My father died when I was 17. That's not what was funny. He was funny. People always say to me, oh, you'll never grow up to be as funny as your dad. And now, he's not around to see me be not as funny as him. My sister Nancy is a nun. My mom works to support the family. That's all beside the point. It's no concern of yours whether or not they need the money I make. What I'm talking about is between you and me. If you can see it in your heart to laugh whenever I say something, I don't care what it is, or if you can't laugh, think about my family and the father that I never really got to know. If I know you're on my side, I'll make you laugh so hard, you'll have to hold your sides to keep from pulling a muscle or tearing a cartilage. It's up to you. Yeah, you. Now, I don't want letters. I just want to make it as a not ready for prime time player. And when that's done, I'll be able to stand here on a Saturday night in the middle of Rockefeller Plaza, New York City, New York, 10020, and say, Dad, I did it. He'd like that.
So this was a turning point for Bill Murray. If you were watching the show at the time, you'll remember he was not on the very first season of the show. He had auditioned, but he just barely didn't make the cut. And the show, the first season, turned into the Chevy Chase show. And Chevy Chase took the lion's share of the credit for the success of the show, so much so that at the beginning of the second season, he left the show to pursue a movie career and to follow a girlfriend to LA. They replaced him with Bill Murray. And Bill Murray was introduced to a mountain of hate mail for basically for getting rid of Chevy Chase, even though it wasn't his fault. The group was not bonding. He did not have any sense of comfort. He had no sense of safety in the team. And it wasn't until Lorne decided that the solution here is transparency that things started turning around. It's fascinating as you watch that, how deep you go and still tell the truth before you start working it for laughs. And I don't think there was anything in there, even when he starts talking about his father, that wasn't true. It sort of reminds me I was reading a book the other day, and it was talking about the difference between honesty and transparency. So for a struggling business that's losing money and is facing the specter of having to lay off employees, the honest company doesn't say anything about it because you're not, by not saying anything, at least you're not lying. But the transparent company confronts that brutal truth and says, hey, it's not looking good. Here are the financial facts, and I can't promise that we can keep everybody around long term. So that's transparency. Now that we've enabled transparency, let's see if we can't take a deeper dive into our opportunities to inspect and adapt. I'm going to walk through basically the mechanics of a week at the show. Monday is when everything starts. That's the first day that the host arrives. And this is really the first day that the host has any idea what the show is going to be about. This is known as pitch day. So everybody's hanging around in the morning in their offices, and then one of the pages runs up and down the halls yelling pitch, which is the signal for everybody to pile into Lorne Michaels' office and just rapid fire to Lorne and to the host all of their ideas that they could possibly execute for the week. And you're going to hear about 100 ideas in this session. It looks like this. So this is actually from Bobby Moynihan's Instagram account. This was his last day on the show. That's him on the lower left corner. And you could see sitting in the green chair in the middle with that gargantuan bicep and tricep combo, that's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's the host for the week. And you can see Lorne sitting behind the desk to his left, I guess to his right, to our left. You got Keenan Thompson up above him in the back, and Pete Davidson. You probably recognize, if you're a fan of the show, you'll recognize a few other faces. This is the last show of the season for this year. And there are as many, if not more, people that didn't make it into the frame because they're packed so tightly, and there are so many people vying for getting their ideas heard. You'll notice, by the way, too, on that back wall behind Pete Davidson over there on the right, that's Lorne Michaels' Kanban board that he uses to manage each week and the season. So, and he doesn't refer to it as a Kanban board if you're keeping score. So, yeah, this is writers, this is cast members, and it's people saying, hey, we could do a sketch about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as the Incredible Hulk. Hey, we could do a sketch where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson does Mr. Peepers, right? So it's ideas that are about that long. They all leave after pitch is done, and then the host and Lorne Michaels stick around, and they whittle that list down to about 60 ideas. So they toss out roughly half of the ideas. 60 ideas. Keep that in mind, because at the end of the week, we only have room in a 90-minute show for 10 sketches maximum. So that's Monday. They take those 60 sketches and they write scripts for all 60 sketches. And I mean word for word. These are not conceptual ideas where the writer says, okay, and then this character says something like this. It's word for word, character by character, measured by its length and so on. All day long, starting Tuesday at about midnight into Wednesday. On Wednesday, they finish their writing and they go right into a read through. And they take those 60 ideas and they fit into a room that looks like this. Everybody's got a copy of all of the scripts. It's just piles and piles of paper and food everywhere. And you spend a long period of time reading through all of these scripts. And these read-throughs become these sort of Shark Tank style pitches for getting their script to be selected. So it's not uncommon for small collections of people to get up out of their seats and start demonstrating what this sketch would look like on its feet. So that lasts for an absurd amount of time. And then when that's done, the host and Lorne Michaels stick around, and once again, they whittle that list down. So they get down to about 20 sketches. We're still twice as many sketches in the hopper as we have time for on Saturday night. So we take those 20 sketches, and then we get into design. So those scripts are handed over to Eugene Lee, who runs the set department, and they head over to Brooklyn, and they start making sets for 20 sketches. And they get into the rehearsal process for 20 sketches. This is when you start hiring all of your extras. So it's about 6 months before I was on Saturday Night Live. I was called by Saturday Night Live and offered a spot as an extra in one of their sketches. And then pretty quickly thereafter, like the next day, called and said, hey, sorry, never mind, your sketch has already been cut. So that's the sort of thing that happens around Thursday and Friday. And then Saturday is that sort of dress rehearsal. That's, this sort of thing that happens while while dress rehearsal's going on. Saturday is a more intense rehearsal. There are 2 performances on Saturday, and some lighter rehearsals in the earlier part of the day. But at 8:30 Eastern, every Saturday that there's a show, they pack a full crowd into the studio. And they perform the show as if they were going to be live, except that this show has about 20 sketches, whereas the live show has about 10. And the reason that they do that is because they have no idea which of these 20 sketches are the funniest. They come at it from this perspective that they're probably wrong, which should sound a lot like the lean startup. So we better put something in front of someone and find out what the reaction is. So they measure it based on laughter. Whatever gets the best reaction, for the most part, is the 10 sketches that make it on the air. But what's also interesting is the fact that it's not just the laughter. So sometimes when your sketch gets cut, it gets cut because the person that was cast in the sketch before it was also not cut, and it was funnier, and the costume change required to get from one sketch to the next is just not, it doesn't have enough time in order to accommodate both sketches. And they can't figure out how to rearrange it so they could keep both in. One of them comes out. It's also funny because the whittling down of sketches doesn't end once you reach 11:30 on Saturday. They have this mission to end their broadcast at 12:59:57. So that's 12:59 and 57 seconds. And they're watching from minute 1 through minute 90 to figure out what they need to cut, what they need to shave, what they need to do to get to that 90-minute mark. Which is one of the main reasons that they have avoided using digital cue cards that are attached to the cameras. They still, to this day, use handwritten cue cards because, number one, they can't rely on the technology. And number two, when you have to make a decision between commercial breaks to cut 1 minute out of a sketch, it is infinitely easier to just put a thick whiteout over a few lines or to eliminate a few cue cards from the stack than it is to get into a program, make the needed adjustments, and then push it back out to the cameras. So then Sunday, you recharge and you start all over again. What I find fascinating, one of the million things that I find fascinating about this, this whole approach is that on Monday, on pitch day, the host has no idea what the show is going to look like on Saturday, nor does the cast, nor does Lorne Michaels. The first time you get a hint about what it could possibly look like is during that pitch session, that initial pitch session where everybody crowds into the office. There's a famous story in season 1 where they were trying to get Richard Pryor to be a host of the show. And Richard Pryor was a holdout because he kept saying, "Show me the script. As soon as I can see the script, then I can make a decision about whether or not I want to be on the show." And it just took forever to get them to understand, to get him to understand that there is no script, that there will not be a script until he signs on to be a part of the show. And the thing that actually wound up sealing the deal for him was the amount of time that the writers spent building a relationship with him and proving to him that they were funny people so that he could trust that he was in good hands as a host of the show. Now, 45 years later, it's sort of this coveted spot. People want to and ask to become a host of the show. Excuse me. I mentioned that that Kanban board in the back of Lauren's office. He's got one board that represents the season, and he's got another board that represents each show. On the left is the one that represents the season. And you can see it's kind of broken out by program increments, so to speak. So that first block of 3, the second block of 3, the third block of 3, and then we get into a block of 4, another block of 3, a block of 2, and then another block of 3. Each of those blocks are contiguous show weeks. And then in between, there's a break. They take a Saturday off. This is a demanding schedule. And if they just went week without taking the break, they would see even more death on their hands than they've already experienced. So what's also interesting to note is that this is what the board looks like at the end of the season. At the beginning of the season, you know what your groupings are going to be. We know we're going to do a September 30th, October 7th, and October 14th group. Then we're going to take a break and we're going to do another 3. But what we don't know is beyond that, we probably don't know for the November sessions. We don't know who's hosting and we don't know who the musical guests are. Sometime around that first grouping, they're figuring out who they're going to get to host and who they're going to bring in to do their musical act. And then on the right, you've got the board for each episode. It's color-coded, and a lot of it is written. The things that are not written, they know they have 9 commercial breaks. They know that they have an opening montage. They know that they have a weekend update. they know they have a musical act, but they don't know who it's going to be week by week. So they reserve that for the pink in the third and fourth columns, and they handwrite that. And this thing is moving around all the time. And they use, rather than specifying a specific whip limit, they've got whip limits based on how many cards they're willing to put in a specific column. And that number shrinks as they go through the week. And then they've also sort of limited whip by creating those columns for each of those 30-minute segments of the show. Sustainable pace is an interesting subject when it comes to SNL. I mentioned that there's really not a soft spot in the schedule. It is brutal, and it takes a special type of person and a special type of sacrifice to get through it. It is 100% complete dedication to the show and sacrifice of really anything else. Lorne Michaels is known for saying, we don't go on because it's perfect. We go on because it's 11:30. It's not just a testament to the pace that they put together, but I mean, you think about that in the context of Scrum, and we talk about those hard boundaries that we like to put between iteration start and iteration end. Sometimes you get to the point where it is 11:45 and you thought, as a writer, you thought your sketch was going to air, but what you didn't anticipate was that BTS, that Korean pop band, was going to be the musical act, and you didn't anticipate that the crowd was going to yell and scream and cheer and fawn all over the band as long as they did. And they wound up having to cut your sketch at 11:45 because they have to stop at 12:59:57. Likewise, that beginning boundary as well. You might not be as ready as you want to be. And sometimes when we watch the show, you can tell they're not as ready as they wanted to be, but guess what? It's live. We're being broadcast across the country. It's 11:30 and it's going to be what it's going to be. So we better keep this thing in a state where it could be performable at any point. I think the parallel to technical excellence is kind of fascinating as well. So I mentioned Eugene Lee. He's the set designer and the head of design at Saturday Night Live. He's also the designer for a lot of Broadway shows. If you've seen Wicked, for example, he designed the set for Wicked. He's an interesting character. He mandates that every set built every week be disassembled completely and then hauled back to the shipyard that they bought to store all of the sets for Saturday Night Live. They disassemble every single set every single week. So I think that if you look at the bottom of this picture, you can see this guy is working on the board for Celebrity Jeopardy. Even that show where it's going to be recurring, you know there's going to be another Celebrity Jeopardy. They disassemble it completely, and his philosophy is we don't want to speak for the writers and we don't want to speak for the performers. We don't want to ever have to put ourselves in a position to say, I'm sorry, our sets weren't designed for you to be able to do that. They recognize that the value that flows to the audience members' television flows through a lot of different entities, and he has created an entity that has sub-optimized itself for the good of the whole. So he has purposefully reduced efficiency, he's reduced optimization so that he can allow for optimization of the various elements when they're put together. We talk about individuals and interactions. Really, the reason I want to talk about this is because the situation that they've created at SNL is unique in that they've got the cream of the crop, and they get to break the rules as a result. So here's your standard bell curve. I was told this story by John Mozeliak. He's the GM of the Cardinals, and he's trying to explain where their talent comes from, where baseball talent comes from, and how funny it is when people say they almost made it to the major leagues. He showed this graph to a group of us and said, you have to remember when you were talking about the people that actually play in the major leagues, if we're using the bell curve where the middle of the bell curve represents the talent level of most of the people who play baseball, most people are of average talent. On the left here, you've got some people that are spectacularly bad at baseball. I might be one of those people. But then on the right side of the bell curve, you've got some people, fewer obviously, much fewer, who are spectacularly good at playing baseball. Those are the people that they're recruiting. Likewise, the people that are recruited to perform on Saturday Night Live are the funniest people on the planet. Right now, there are twice or three times as many people on the show as there should be. But at 17 or 18, whatever that number is right now, that's still the 17 or 18th, presumably, funniest sketch comedians on the planet. If you're the 20th funniest sketch comedian, you're not necessarily good enough to be on the show. When you have talent at that level, you get to play around with some of the rules that we sort of take for granted. You get to do things in a different way because you're leveraging those individuals and you're leveraging their interactions at such a higher degree than a lot of us get the opportunity to do. Let's talk about retrospectives or in general, just continuous improvement. This is Daryl Hammond. You know, I used to not be the biggest fan of Daryl Hammond, and then I read his book and I have a completely new level of respect for the guy. So you can't deny that he's the best impressionist that's ever been on the show. And when he grew up, when he was growing up, he at one point decided he was going to be a comedian. He grew up in Florida, and the major markets in Florida are all along the coastline, except for Orlando, which means if you're a comedian, you're doing stand-up, you're driving from major market to major market, you're spending a lot of time in the car. Daryl Hammond, before he joined the show, long before he joined the show, he made a deal with himself. He said, I'm spending all this time in the car. I could either allow that time to go to waste, or I could make a deal with myself. I could say every week, I'm going to get better at one thing, whether it's perfecting my R sound when I'm doing my Bill Clinton, or I'm perfecting the way my head wiggles when I'm doing my Jesse Jackson, whatever it is, just pick one specific thing, work on it for a week. Every year, that's 52 improvements. Over a 5-year period, and this is Daryl Hammond speaking, that's about 250 improvements. He says, I may not be the funniest comedian out there, I might not have the most talent, but I can outwork just about any other comedian, and I don't know how many comedians can say that they've executed 250 improvements over the last 5 years. Now, you can kind of see it in the show, in his performance. We talk about continuous delivery a lot, especially in the software circles, the idea that that we're moving software from its in development state to an in production state on a hyper frequent basis. And we're doing that because we want to get feedback in ways that we don't have to broadcast to the entire nation in order to do. We talk about feature toggles and hiding features behind a curtain. And when those features are ready, we open up the curtain. Well, that's exactly what Saturday Night Live is doing with the way that they deliver their show. Each rehearsal from Thursday onward, even taking into account this idea that they've in a sense doubled the number of features that they can deliver to production. They've doubled the number of features in development versus the number that make it to production. All of that they're getting into some form of production behind a curtain in order to figure out if that feature needs to stay. And it's not until they get to that final show at 11:30 where they decide to open up the curtain and just display the features that they have decided they've gotten the feedback on that makes sense to display. In the first season of Saturday Night Live, Buck Henry was one of the first guests. I think he was like the 5th or 6th guest of the first season. At the time, the policy on the show by Lorne Michaels was, we don't do recurring characters. It's just not what we do. Well, Buck Henry came in and said, hey, I'd really like to do a samurai sketch. I saw that sketch that Richard Pryor did, and I'd like to do that. I'd like to do one of those. And he won the argument against Lorne Michaels, so they did another one. It was called Samurai Delicatessen. And at one point, John Belushi is waving a sword around on live television as part of the sketch, and he clips Buck Henry in the forehead. And you can't see it on TV now because all they'll show is the recording from dress rehearsal. But he's bleeding all over the set. And at the end of the sketch, they have to butterfly him and they have to put a big bandage on his head. And for the rest of the show, Buck Henry's got this bandage on his head. Well, nobody says a word about it, especially nobody from the cast. But sketch after sketch, Lorraine Newman on the far left, she decides she's going to do a sketch with Buck Henry, but she's going to put a Band-Aid on her forehead. And then the next sketch, you notice that Dan Aykroyd's got a Band-Aid on his forehead. And then the next sketch, you notice that Gilda Radner's in a cast. And by the end of the show, all of the cast members with Buck Henry have these bandages all over their bodies. Nobody said a word about it. They just noticed that one person was doing it, and they made that silent agreement that says, okay, I'll take that norm and I'll expand it. And that particular cast looks back on that episode and says, that's when we made the jump from norming to performing. They say they spent a lot of time after the forming stage, storming with each other and trying to figure out who's going to get all the airtime, who's going to become famous, who's going to be known for what. They worked their way through that. They figured out what their norms were. They figured out that if they're working together, that they're able to get into a performing state, and that each of them looks better individually when they're all operating as a team. To me, that just stands out as one of the best illustrations of the Tuckman model and the idea of self-organization. Nobody told any one of them to put a Band-Aid on their forehead. That was a decision that one individual of the team just decided to take upon themselves, and the rest of the team decided to embed that in their unwritten team charter as a norm. Give them the environment and the support they need and trust them to get the job done. Well, at some point in the 90s, that whole notion of trust and support from leadership to the teams sort of eroded. That's James Downey. He and Norm Macdonald were the Weekend Update team. Macdonald would present the news, but most of it was written by James Downey. There was a producer, Don Olemeyer, who happened to be a good friend of O.J. Simpson's, and there was some controversy as to whether or not Norm Macdonald was fired because the producer of Saturday Night Live at the time was a friend of O.J.'s and he was offended. The truth is, at least what Olemeyer will say, is that he just didn't think it was funny. But what you have is this odd situation where popularly, Norm Macdonald was a hit on Weekend Update. Audiences loved him, either loved him or hated him, but more people loved him than hated him. And it generally, the critical opinion was that it was working. But this producer decided to have an opinion and to interject that opinion and to sort of exercise muscle into the goings on of the show. And it sort of created this havoc and created a vacuum. Colin Quinn took over, and there was a string afterwards for a while of really subpar Weekend Update moments. I remember listening to James Downey talk about it, and that notion of this thing never works when the executives step in. When you break that bond, that boundary of self-organization, and you start allowing the executives and executive opinions to filter their way through and to make the stakeholder voice a disproportionate volume of the voice needed to receive appropriate feedback and to craft excellence in a product, things start to break down. All right, we're coming to the end here. I hope you guys are still with me. I just want to mention, this guy's been around for 45 years. He's the king of late night comedy. He's created this comedy empire. What is he doing? What has he done that is that's so fascinating? I don't claim to have the final word here. Just put together a few thoughts to get it started. It all starts with this notion that we don't go on because it's perfect. We go on because it's 11:30. I mean, it's an excellent distillation, and he has this way of creating this expression that just puts everything into perspective. Not only does it put into perspective that I'm not looking for perfection from you, but it just has to be good enough by the time we go on. He suggests that producers, and we can transplant leaders for producers. Producers are supposed to be invisible. The cast has to inhabit their own decisions. There's a producer, his name is Kenny Imong, on the show, and he's the one who generally brings new producers on board. And he tells new producers when they come on board, look, you're gonna have to be okay with the idea of these kids on the show who have a lot less experience than you, who've never really dealt with television before. You're gonna have to just be okay with the fact that they're gonna be telling you what to do. That all comes from Lorne Michaels. It comes from the idea that the power exists within the people that are delivering, the people who have the knowledge of, and in this case, the knowledge of what's funny and what works. There's another story about how Tina Fey and Amy Poehler came to host Weekend Update together. Prior to that, it was Jimmy Fallon and Tina Fey. Jimmy Fallon left to do the Late Show. And it was up to Tina Fey. She could have had Weekend Update all to herself. You have to remember, Weekend Update is this only this super coveted spot because it's the only point in the show where, besides the opening credits, where a cast member's name is named. And that's what skyrocketed Chevy Chase to fame, because it was only a weekend update when they said, and now weekend update with Chevy Chase. Well, from that point on, whoever was sitting in that update chair had the advantage of having their name mentioned every Saturday. So here's the question. Lorne Michaels is trying to influence the idea that it would be great if Amy Poehler were a co-host. But all he did was say to Tina, you have the choice. It's either you or you could introduce somebody. I think, Amy would be terrific, but whatever you think. And from that point forward, whether he forced his hand or not through influence and power, at the end of the day, Tina Fey felt like it was her decision to invite Amy Poehler into that co-host chair. Organize loosely. You never know what will come up. You've heard this, this has been heard a number of times by Lorne Michaels. He doesn't like the idea of the organizational structure. He doesn't even like to tell people that they've made it to the show. He doesn't like to make too many commitments because that's an expectation that he has to uphold. The looser the organization, the looser the structure, for example, the structure of the show, the easier it is to fit something in that you didn't expect. For example, that, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't expect Trump to tweet 100 times on Friday night. Now, if we've got all of these sketches planned on Wednesday and this activity happens on Friday, but America is expecting us to respond to it in some way, is the structure that we've created going to allow us to do this? Skip over that. So he firmly believes that people have to be bad before they can be good, and you have to give people an opportunity to be bad. Most famously, the very first Wayne's World sketch on Saturday Night Live in the 90s appeared at that 11:45, 12:45 time slot, the sort of the no man's land of sketches where only the faithful are still awake and watching. These new cast members that show up now as featured players, you have to give those actors an opportunity to fail on the show, because it's that failure that teaches you what not to do. It's that massive amount of failure in that safe zone of 12:45 that gives you the practice to be good. Likewise, dress rehearsal has to be bad before the show can be good. And that goes well beyond Lorne Michaels. That's more of an entertainment philosophy. Bad dress rehearsal leads to a good performance. But we don't, in our industry, in the software industry, I think we're missing that opportunity to be bad. We're missing that opportunity to get something out there that just really doesn't sit right so that we can come to grips with it. We can understand what it was that was so bad and fix it and make it better. We have this notion that when we build something, it's go time. It is game time, and it's got to be right the first time out. His ability to praise people is really unique. His compliments are scant at best, but they're really obscure. So he's not going to say, hey, great job in that sketch. He's going to say, that thing that you did like a minute and a half in with your left eyebrow, right when the camera cut to you, mastery. He's going to say something like that. And people are going to notice that he's noticing. And they're going to notice the level at which he's noticing. And that has a tendency to improve the level of performance. He puts more energy into taking care of his cast than anything else. To him, the cast is the most valuable entity. The people are the most valuable entity aspect of the show. And you could see that he learned this. He didn't believe it to the extent that he believes it today. You can see the amount of effort that he put into taking care of Belushi in comparison to the amount of time he spent taking care of Farley was very different. He put Farley into rehab a few times on his own, whereas it was kind of a hands-off approach with Belushi. And now the amount of time that he spends with Pete Davidson, making sure that his health is taken care of, is kind of above and beyond the relationship of between an individual and their leader that you see most other places. So let's rehash that definition. We looked at the concept of the team. We looked at the concept of self-organization, but still caring for the individual a lot. We see that they're delivering value continuously and frequently, that a lot of what they do is based on the idea that you have to learn from what you've delivered. You have to come at it from the notion that you're wrong and then adjust accordingly. And they've been doing that for at least 45 years, and I don't think they have plans to stop anytime soon. If you're a geek like me and you want to learn more about this stuff, there's a host of books out there directly or indirectly related to the show. One that I'd like to call out, God, if you're, excuse my language, God, if you're not up there, I'm fucked, by Daryl Hammond. It's more than just a good SNL book. It's if you're into stories of mental health, that's a stellar book. Does anybody have any questions?
Please do.
No is fair.
This is a great presentation. Thank you so much. So
Sure.